The alarm bells rang through the deep space monitoring station on Europa like nothing Commander Jake Morrison had ever heard before. He ran down the metal corridors as fast as his boots would carry him, while other officers rushed past him in the opposite direction. The year was 2157, and humanity had just learned to travel between the stars, but they were still new to everything beyond their own solar system. Jake burst into the control room, where dozens of technicians stared at their screens with wide eyes and open mouths. Chief Analyst Karen Boyd turned to face him with a look that mixed fear and excitement in equal parts. She pointed at the largest display screen, which showed a massive object drifting in the darkness beyond Pluto. The thing was huge beyond anything humans had ever built. It stretched over 3 kilometers from one end to the other and looked like someone had taken a mountain and carved it into the shape of a ship. The hull was dark gray metal that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, and strange curved sections jutted out at angles that made no sense to human engineering. Karen spoke in a voice that trembled slightly as she explained what they had found. The object had appeared on their sensors 12 hours ago, but it was not moving under its own power. Instead, it drifted slowly through space like a piece of debris. However, this was no ordinary wreckage, because the scans showed it was made from materials that did not exist in any human database. Jake stared at the screen and felt his heart beat faster as he realized what this meant. Humanity had just discovered proof that they were not alone in the universe. Somewhere out there, other intelligent beings had built this massive ship, and for reasons unknown, they had abandoned it in human space. The next few hours passed in a blur of emergency meetings and urgent communications with Earth. Admiral Patricia Stone gave Jake command of the research vessel Hartford and ordered him to investigate the alien ship immediately. His team would include the best people humanity could offer for this historic mission. Chief Engineer Lisa Rodriguez joined them first. She was a small woman with oil stains permanently under her fingernails and a reputation for fixing things that should not be fixable. Her specialty was reverse engineering technology and making it work better than the original designers ever intended. Dr. Paul Carter came aboard next as their xenobiologist. He had spent his entire career studying the possibility of alien life, and now he would be the first human to actually encounter it. His hands shook with excitement as he loaded his equipment onto the Hartford. Captain Kate Sullivan completed the team as their tactical specialist. She was a former Marine who had fought in the asteroid belt wars and knew how to handle dangerous situations. If the alien ship contained any threats, she would be ready for them. The Hartford launched from Europa 3 days after the discovery and began the long journey to intercept the alien vessel. During the flight, Jake and his team studied every piece of data they could gather about their target. The more they learned, the more mysterious it became. The ship appeared to be very old, but showed signs of advanced technology far beyond human capabilities. Energy readings suggested it had once possessed some kind of exotic power source, but those systems now showed as completely dead. Most puzzling of all were the biosignatures that indicated the ship had once carried living beings but was now empty. When they finally reached the alien vessel, Jake felt his breath catch in his throat. Seeing it on screens was one thing, but approaching the massive ship in person was something else entirely. The Hartford looked like a tiny insect next to the alien craft, and Jake realized that whoever built this ship came from a civilization far more advanced than humanity. Lisa found a docking port that seemed designed to accept smaller vessels, and she carefully maneuvered the Hartford into position. The alien airlock systems were inactive, but her tools managed to create a seal that would allow them to board safely. They put on their environmental suits and prepared to step into the unknown. The interior of the ship was dark and cold, but there, lights revealed corridors and chambers built on a scale that suggested the aliens were roughly the same size as humans. However, everything else about the ship was completely foreign. The walls curved in impossible ways, and strange symbols covered every surface. Dr. Carter immediately began scanning for biological traces, while Kate kept watch for any signs of danger. Lisa headed straight for what appeared to be an engineering section, while Jake searched for anything that might be a command center or computer system. They found the first alien body in what seemed to be a medical bay. The being was tall and thin, with gray skin and large eyes that had once been blue. Dr. Carter examined it carefully and determined that death had occurred many years ago. More bodies were found throughout the ship, all showing signs of some kind of wasting disease. Jake discovered the command center after hours of searching through the massive ship. Banks of dead computers surrounded a central chair where another alien body sat slumped over a control panel. Unlike the others, this one wore what appeared to be a uniform with symbols that might indicate rank. Lisa made the first real breakthrough when she found the ship's main computer core. Most of the systems were dead, but she managed to connect her portable power unit and bring some basic functions online. Slowly, data began to flow across alien displays, and translation programs started working to decode the strange symbols. The alien writing system was complex, but patterns emerged as computers analyzed thousands of examples. Dr. Carter discovered that the aliens called themselves the Zelani, and this ship was named the Varthik. More importantly, they learned that this was not a warship, but a colony vessel carrying refugees from a dying world. As more data was decoded, a tragic story emerged. The Zelani homeworld had been dying from some kind of environmental disaster, and millions of their people had fled in great ships like this one. The Varthik had been traveling for over 200 years, searching for a new planet where the Zelani could rebuild their civilization. However, disaster had struck when the ship's exotic matter containment systems began to fail. Without this mysterious power source, all of the ship's advanced systems started shutting down one by one. The Zelani had tried everything they could think of to repair the damage, but their technology required materials and equipment they did not have. Faced with the choice between dying slowly as their ship lost power or taking a desperate chance, the surviving Zelani had abandoned the Varthik in small escape pods. They left behind all their advanced technology and headed for the nearest star system, hoping to find some way to survive. Jake and his team spent days exploring the ship and downloading as much data as they could carry. What they found amazed them beyond anything they had imagined. The Zelani had mastered technologies that humanity was still centuries away from developing. Their computers were based on some kind of biological neural networks, and their weapons could manipulate energy in ways that seemed almost magical. Most incredible of all were the ship's construction blueprints, which showed how the Zelani built vessels that could travel between galaxies. The exotic matter that powered everything was some kind of artificial element that existed in a state between energy and matter. However, the Zelani believed that once this substance decayed, there was no way to replace it or find an alternative. As Jake prepared to return to Earth with their incredible discovery, he realized that the Zelani had made one crucial mistake. They had given up on their ship because they could not repair it exactly as it had been built. However, humans had built their entire civilization on the principle that broken things could always be fixed somehow. The Varthik represented the greatest technological treasure in human history, and Jake was determined that humanity would succeed where the Zelani had failed. They would find a way to make this incredible ship fly again, even if it meant completely rebuilding it from the ground up. News of the alien ship spread through human space faster than anyone had expected. Within days, every major government and corporation was demanding access to the Zelani technology. Scientists and engineers from every nation on Earth volunteered to join what quickly became known as the Phoenix Initiative. Admiral Patricia Stone made the decision to tow the massive alien vessel back to Earth's orbital shipyards, where humanity's best minds could study it properly. The operation took 6 months and required the combined efforts of every heavy transport ship in the solar system. When the Varthik finally arrived in Earth orbit, it became the center of the largest research project in human history. Dr. Amy Walsh was among the first specialists to board the alien ship. As a metallurgist, she was fascinated by the strange materials the Zilani had used in their construction. Her initial scans revealed that the hull was made from alloys that contained elements not found on Earth, but she quickly realized that human materials, science might actually improve on the alien design. The Zilani had built their ship to last for thousands of years, but they had not considered the possibility of damage repair. Dr. Walsh discovered that, by adding Earth-based metals to the alien alloys, she could create composites that were both stronger and easier to manufacture. This was the first sign that human technology might complement rather than simply copy Zilani science. Lead engineer Marcus Thompson faced a bigger challenge with the ship's power systems. The exotic matter that had once powered everything was completely gone, and the Zilani databases contained no information about how to create more. However, Marcus had an idea that would have shocked the original builders of the ship. Human fusion reactors were primitive compared to Zilani exotic matter systems, but they had one major advantage. Humans knew exactly how to build them, and the fuel was available everywhere in the universe. Marcus began designing hybrid power systems that would use fusion reactors to feed energy into the Zilani distribution networks. The work was incredibly complex because the two technologies operated on completely different principles. Zilani systems were designed for the smooth, consistent power that exotic matter provided, while human fusion reactors produced energy in controlled bursts. Marcus and his team had to redesign thousands of components to make the two systems work. Together, Dr. Ben Crawford tackled the ship's computer systems with equal determination. The Zilani neural networks were far more advanced than human quantum computers, but they required biological components that were no longer available. Ben discovered that by combining human processing power with the remaining Zilani systems, he could create something entirely new. The hybrid computers that emerged from his work were unlike anything either species had imagined. They combined the raw calculating power of human quantum systems with the intuitive problem-solving abilities of Zilani neural networks. The result was a computer that could not only process information, but actually learn and adapt to new situations. Colonel Nina Foster brought her weapons expertise to bear on the ship's defensive systems. The Zilani had built energy weapons that could slice through solid metal, like paper, but they had never considered combining energy and kinetic weapons. Nina realized that human projectile weapons could be dramatically enhanced by Zilani energy. Systems. Her new hybrid weapons fired solid projectiles that were accelerated by magnetic fields and then wrapped in energy sheaths that increased their penetrating power. The combination was devastating because it merged the reliability of physical ammunition with the precision of energy weapons. However, the real breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Danny Cooper was a civilian engineer who had started his career as an auto mechanic before moving into spaceship maintenance. He had no formal education in advanced physics, but he understood machines in a way that impressed even the top scientists. Danny was studying the Zilani engine designs when he made an observation that changed everything. The aliens had built their entire ship around the assumption that exotic matter was the only possible power source. However, humans had learned to work with whatever materials they could find and make the best of any situation. Instead of trying to recreate the Zilani ship exactly as it had been built, Danny suggested something revolutionary. Why not build completely new ship that used the best ideas from both civilizations while avoiding the weaknesses of each? The Zilani had advanced materials and energy manipulation, but humans had better manufacturing techniques and more flexible design principles. The proposal shocked the scientific community because it meant abandoning the idea of simply repairing the alien ship. Instead, they would use the Varthik as a source of technology and inspiration while building something entirely new. Many experts argued that humans were not advanced enough to improve on Zelani engineering. Danny proved them wrong. By building a small prototype engine that combined human fusion technology with Zelani energy manipulation systems, the hybrid drive was not only more efficient than either technology alone, but it was also much easier to manufacture and maintain. Most importantly, it could be built using materials that were readily available to humans. The success of Danny's prototype convinced Admiral Stone to authorize a complete redesign of the project. Instead of restoring the Zelani ship, they would build a new vessel that incorporated the best aspects of both civilizations. The ship would be human in its basic design philosophy, but enhanced with alien technology wherever it provided clear advantages. Work began immediately on what would become the Starship, Defiance. The hull was built using Dr. Walsh's improved alloys, while the internal structure followed human engineering principles. Marcus Thompson's hybrid power systems provided energy, while Ben Crawford's neural quantum computers controlled every aspect of the ship's operation. The construction took 3 years and required innovations in every area of human technology. Workers had to learn entirely new manufacturing techniques, while engineers solved problems that had never existed before. However, human determination and creativity proved equal to every challenge. Lisa Rodriguez led the team that designed the ship's internal systems. She insisted that every component should be easily accessible for maintenance and repair. The Zelani had built beautiful machines, but they had made them almost impossible to fix when something went wrong. Lisa made sure that human engineers could reach every part of their hybrid systems. Dr. Carter contributed by studying Zelani biological databases and finding ways to improve human life support systems. The aliens had developed techniques for recycling air and water that were far more efficient than anything humans had created. By adapting these methods, the Defiance could support its crew for months without resupply. Captain Kate Sullivan worked with Colonel Foster to design tactical systems that would give the new ship unprecedented combat capabilities. They assumed that humanity would eventually encounter hostile alien species, and the Defiance needed to be ready for anything. The combination of human tactics with Zelani technology created weapon systems that neither species could have imagined alone. As construction neared completion, Jake Morrison was promoted to admiral and given command of the new vessel. He had led the team that discovered the Zelani ship, and Admiral Stone believed he understood both human and alien technology better than anyone else. Defiance was unlike any ship that had ever been built. From the outside, it looked human with clean lines and practical design features. However, a closer look revealed hull materials that seemed to shimmer with inner light and weapon ports that hummed with barely contained energy. Inside the ship, the blend of technologies was even more apparent. Human-style corridors and compartments were filled with control panels that displayed information in ways that seemed almost alive. The bridge combined familiar command layouts with displays that could show 3-dimensional images floating in mid-air. Most impressive of all was the ship's performance during initial testing. The hybrid drive systems could push the Defiance to speeds that no human ship had ever achieved, while the enhanced hull materials made it nearly indestructible. Weapons tests showed that the ship could destroy targets that would have required entire fleets of conventional human warships. However, the true test of their achievement would come when the Defiance encountered other alien species. The Zelani databases contained references to dozens of different civilizations, but most of the information was incomplete. Humanity was about to discover that the galaxy was far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. 3 years after construction began, the Defiance was ready for its first mission. A Zelani distress signal had been detected from a star system 30 light-years away, and Admiral Morrison received orders to investigate. The ship that had been built from alien wreckage was about to meet the aliens who had originally built it. As the Defiance prepared to leave Earth orbit, Jake stood on the bridge and marveled at what human ingenuity had accomplished. They had taken a broken alien ship and turned it into something better than either species could have built alone. The real question was whether their hybrid creation would be enough to face whatever waited for them among the stars. The distress signal from the Kepler 442 system had been broadcasting for 6 days when the Defiance finally arrived at the edge of the star system. Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge studying the tactical displays while his crew prepared for their first encounter with living aliens. The signal was definitely Zelani in origin, but it was faint and filled with static that suggested the senders were in desperate trouble. Commander Ryan Clark served as Jake's second-in-command, and he had spent weeks studying every piece of information they had about potential alien threats. The Zelani databases mentioned several hostile species, but the files were incomplete, and much of the data was centuries old. However, one name appeared repeatedly in the records as a source of terror throughout the galaxy. The Korthic Empire had been expanding across the stars for over 300 years, according to Zelani historical files. They were a militaristic species that conquered every civilization they encountered and enslaved any survivors. The Zelani had fled their dying homeworld partly to escape Korthic expansion into their territory. As the Defiance moved deeper into the system, the tactical sensors began detecting multiple ships near the fourth planet. Captain Kate Sullivan analyzed the energy signatures and confirmed Jake's worst fears. There were over 30 vessels present, and most of them matched the profiles of Korthic warships from the Zelani databases. However, there were also 12 smaller ships that appeared to be civilian vessels with minimal weapons and failing power systems. These were broadcasting the distress signals, and their design matched Zelani refugee ships that had fled their homeworld centuries ago. Somehow a group of Zelani survivors had been found by their worst enemies. Jake ordered the Defiance to approach slowly while maintaining full stealth systems. The hybrid Zelani human technology included cloaking devices that bent light around the ship, making it nearly invisible to conventional sensors. This gave them the advantage of observing the situation before revealing their presence. What they saw made Jake's blood run cold with anger. The Korthic ships had surrounded the Zelani refugees and were systematically destroying their vessels one by one. It was not a battle, but an execution, as the helpless civilian ships were torn apart by energy weapons while their occupants screamed for help over the communication channels. Dr. Paul Carter monitored the alien communications and provided translation as the massacre continued. The Korthic commander was demanding that the Zelani surrender their historical databases and cultural archives before they were allowed to die quickly. The refugees refused and chose to fight back with whatever weapons they could improvise. Lisa Rodriguez studied the Korthic ships and reported that their technology was advanced, but not as sophisticated as the original Zelani systems. However, they had numbers and military training, while the refugees were scientists and civilians who had never expected to fight for their lives. Jake faced the most important decision of his career as he watched innocent beings slaughtered by an alien empire. Humanity had no treaties or obligations to protect the Zelani refugees, but they had built their ship using Zelani technology and knowledge. More importantly, human moral principles could not accept genocide regardless of the species involved. The choice became clear when 3 Korthic ships broke away from the main formation and began herding Zelani civilian vessels toward the star, where the intense radiation would kill everyone aboard. Jake ordered battle stations and prepared to announce humanity's presence to the galaxy in the most dramatic way possible. The Defiance dropped its stealth systems and appeared directly between the Korthic ships and their intended victims. The sudden appearance of an unknown vessel caused confusion among the alien fleets as they tried to identify this new player in their deadly game. General Vexstar commanded the Korthic battle group from his flagship, and he immediately demanded that the human ship identify itself and explain its presence. His message was transmitted in several galactic languages, but Jake chose to respond in clear and simple terms that left no room for misunderstanding. Jake's reply became legendary throughout human space and was recorded for history by every ship present. He looked directly into the communication screen and spoke with the calm authority of someone who had made an irrevocable decision. His words were simple, but they declared humanity's intentions to the entire galaxy. This is Admiral Jake Morrison of the Terran vessel Defiance. You are attacking civilian refugees, and I order you to cease hostilities immediately. Withdraw your forces or face the consequences. General Vexstar's response revealed the contempt that the Korthic Empire held for all other species. He laughed at the human demand and explained that humans were unknown primitives who had no authority to interfere with Korthic justice. The Zelani were criminals who had stolen technology, and refugees had no rights under galactic law. The alien general then made a fatal mistake by threatening to destroy the human ship if it did not withdraw immediately. He assumed that a single unknown vessel could not possibly threaten a battle group of 30 experienced warships. His tactical computers calculated that victory would require less than 5 minutes of concentrated fire. Jake's response became the moment when humanity announced itself as a galactic power. He looked at General Vexstar with the expression of a predator who had just found prey and delivered the line that would be quoted in military academies for centuries to come. General, you have 30 seconds to withdraw, or I will show you why. Humans don't abandon allies, and we sure as hell don't abandon good engineering when we see it. What followed was humanity's first major space battle against an alien enemy, and it revolutionized galactic warfare forever. The Defiance was outnumbered 30-1, but it possessed advantages that the Korthic could not understand or counter. Human tactical doctrine emphasized speed and unpredictability, while the Korthic relied on overwhelming firepower and rigid formations. The Defiance moved through the enemy fleet like a dancer, while hybrid weapon systems destroyed ships faster than the aliens could target their attacker. Colonel Nina Foster's weapons performed beyond even her most optimistic projections. The combination of human kinetic projectiles with Zelani energy enhancement allowed the Defiance to punch through Korthic shields as if they were made of paper. Each shot that connected resulted in massive explosions as enemy ships lost power. An atmosphere. Captain Lisa Warren commanded the ship's defensive systems, and she proved that human creativity could overcome superior numbers. Instead of trying to avoid enemy fire, she used the Defiance's enhanced hull to absorb damage while positioning the ship to protect the Zelani refugees. The battle's turning point came when Jake realized that Korthic tactical computers expected logical and predictable behavior from their opponents. Human tactics that emphasized improvisation and rapid adaptation confused the alien systems and caused targeting errors that human gunners exploited ruthlessly. Dr. Ben Crawford's hybrid computer systems proved their worth by analyzing Korthic attack patterns in real time and suggesting countermeasures that no single species could have developed. The combination of human intuition with Zelani processing power created tactical advantages that multiplied throughout the engagement. However, the most shocking aspect of the battle for the Korthic was humanity's willingness to sacrifice themselves for strangers. When 3 enemy ships broke through the defensive perimeter and threatened the civilian vessels, Captain Warren deliberately placed the Defiance between them and the refugees. The human ship absorbed tremendous damage while the Zelani evacuated to safer positions, but Warren never considered abandoning her post. This behavior was so contrary to Korthic military doctrine that their computers could not process it, and several ships hesitated in confusion. Jake exploited that hesitation by ordering a direct assault on the Korthic flagship. The Defiance charged through the enemy formation, while every weapon fired at maximum power. The alien ships tried to concentrate their fire, but human maneuvering kept them off balance until it was too late. General Vextar's flagship exploded in a massive fireball that lit up the entire system when the Defiance's weapons penetrated its command center. The remaining Korthic ships found themselves leaderless and facing an enemy that fought unlike anything in their experience. The battle ended with 28 Korthic ships destroyed, and the remaining 2 fleeing in terror toward the edge of the system. The Zelani refugees were safely evacuated, while the wreckage of an entire alien battle group drifted in space as proof of humanity's combat capabilities. However, Jake understood that this victory was only the beginning of a much larger conflict. Word of the battle would spread quickly through galactic communication networks, and the Korthic Empire would not ignore the destruction of an entire battle group. Humanity had just declared war on the most powerful military force in the galaxy. As the Defiance began rescue operations for the surviving Zelani refugees, Jake received a priority message from Earth. Admiral Stone's transmission was brief. It carried the weight of humanity's entire future among the stars. Admiral Morrison, your actions today have changed everything. Prepare for consequences, and remember that humanity stands behind every decision you have made. News of the Korthic fleet's destruction spread through the galaxy faster than anyone had expected. Within days, every major civilization knew that an unknown species, called humans, had appeared from nowhere and completely annihilated a battle group that should have been invincible. The implications sent shockwaves through governments that had spent centuries learning to submit to Korthic authority. The Galactic Council demanded an immediate explanation for what they called humanity's unprovoked aggression against established galactic order. Ambassador Helen Price received orders to travel to the Council Station in the Vega system along with Admiral Jake Morrison and a small diplomatic team. However, everyone understood that this would not be a normal diplomatic meeting. The Council Station was massive beyond anything humans had ever constructed. It stretched over 50 kilometers in diameter and contained facilities for hundreds of different species from across the galaxy. However, Ambassador Price noticed immediately that the entire structure was designed to intimidate visitors rather than welcome them. The main council chamber could hold representatives from every known civilization, but most of the seats were empty. Only 23 species remained active in galactic politics, while hundreds of others had been conquered or destroyed by the Korthic Empire over the past 3 centuries. The survivors lived in constant fear, and their entire governmental structure existed primarily to negotiate surrender terms. Chairman Veltar of the Altarian Republic called the emergency session to order and immediately demanded that humanity explain their attack on Korthic forces. His tone suggested that humans were criminals who had violated some fundamental law of galactic civilization. However, Ambassador Price had studied the situation carefully, and she understood the real dynamics at work. The Galactic Council had no actual power to enforce their decisions, because the only military force in the galaxy belonged to the Korthic Empire. Every species that remained independent did so only because they provided resources or services that the Korthic found useful. The Council existed to manage the process of controlled surrender and tribute payments. General Morthek represented the Korthic Empire at the emergency session, and his presence dominated the chamber despite his relatively small size. He wore the black armor of the Imperial military and carried weapons that were illegal for every other species to possess. Most importantly, he spoke with the absolute authority of beings who had never been successfully challenged. The Korthic general's opening statement was brief and direct. Humanity had committed an act of war by attacking Imperial forces and interfering with legitimate law enforcement operations. The penalty for such crimes was the complete destruction of human civilization and the enslavement of any survivors. However, General Morthic was prepared to be merciful if humans immediately surrendered all of their advanced technology and submitted to Imperial authority. The hybrid ship that had defeated the battle group would be handed over to Korthic scientists along with all technical data and the personnel who had built it. Ambassador Price listened to these demands with growing anger as she realized that the Galactic Council expected humanity to simply accept enslavement rather than fight for their freedom. Every species present had made the same choice when faced with Korthic ultimatums, and they could not understand why humans would choose differently. The ambassador's response shocked the council chamber because no one had dared to challenge Korthic authority for over a century. Helen Price stood up slowly and looked directly at General Morthic while she delivered humanity's official position on galactic politics. General, your empire has spent 3 centuries conquering innocent civilizations and slaughtering anyone who resisted. You call this law enforcement, but humans have a different word for it. We call it evil, and we do not negotiate with evil. The chamber erupted in chaos as representatives from dozens of species tried to distance themselves from humanity's provocative statement. Chairman Veltar demanded that Ambassador Price apologize immediately and accept Korthic terms before the situation escalated beyond diplomatic solutions. However, Helen Price was not finished with her statement, and she had something more important to say than diplomatic pleasantries. She turned to address the entire council, while General Morthic watched with growing rage at this unprecedented defiance of Imperial authority. You want to know what makes humans different from every other species in this chamber. 3 years ago, we found a broken alien ship, and we saw possibility where others saw junk. Today, you look at a galactic empire and see inevitability where we see a problem that needs fixing. The ambassador's words cut through centuries of fear and resignation, as she challenged every assumption that had guided galactic politics since the Korthic expansion began. Species that had forgotten the concept of resistance found themselves remembering what they had lost when they chose survival over principles. The difference between humans and everyone else in this room is simple. We still remember how to fight, and we have not forgotten that some things are worth dying for. Freedom is one of those things, and we will not surrender it to bullies, regardless of how many ships they command. General Morthic responded to this defiance with predictable fury, and he made demands that revealed the true nature of Korthic diplomacy. Human colonies would be attacked immediately, and their populations would be enslaved as an example to other species. The Terran government had 72 hours to surrender unconditionally or face complete destruction. The emergency session was interrupted when urgent communications began reaching the council chamber from across the galaxy. Korthic reinforcement fleets were already moving toward human space, while Imperial governors declared martial law on dozens of worlds. The Empire was mobilizing for total war against humanity. Ambassador Price shocked the council one final time by doing something that had never happened in the chamber's long history. Instead of begging for mediation or attempting to negotiate a surrender, she declared war on behalf of all humanity and invited anyone willing to fight to join them. This council has spent 3 centuries managing surrender and negotiating the terms of your own enslavement. Humans refuse to participate in that system, and we invite any species that remembers what freedom means to stand with us against tyranny. 3. Delegations responded to humanity's call for allies, and their decisions changed the course of galactic history. The surviving Zelani had already pledged their support for the species that had saved their refugees, and they offered their advanced scientific knowledge to the human war effort. The Nautilian Commonwealth surprised everyone by announcing their intention to join the human alliance. Their aquatic civilization had been fighting a losing defensive war against Korthic expansion for 50 years, and they saw humanity as their last hope for survival. Most shocking of all was the decision by Commander Zara Quinn of the Altarian peacekeeping force to break with her own government and support the human position. She had spent decades watching injustice spread across the galaxy while her leaders chose political survival over moral principles. Commander Quinn's statement to the Council became as famous as Ambassador Price's declaration of war. She removed her official insignia and threw them on the chamber floor while she announced her resignation from the Altarian military and her intention to join the Human Alliance. I became a peacekeeper to protect innocent people, not to manage their surrender to genocidal empires. If my government chooses collaboration over justice, then I choose to stand with the humans who still remember what justice means. The emergency session collapsed into chaos as the fragile political structure that had maintained galactic order for centuries fell apart. Some species demanded immediate action against the human rebels, while others quietly began considering whether they too had lived under Korthic tyranny long enough. Admiral Morrison received orders to return to Earth immediately, while Ambassador Price and her diplomatic team were evacuated under heavy guard. The Galactic Council voted to condemn humanity's actions, but they had no power to enforce their decision without Korthic military support. As the human delegation prepared to leave the council station, Chairman Veltar made one final attempt to convince them that resistance was futile. He explained that the Korthic Empire controlled over 200 star systems and commanded thousands of warships, while humanity had only demonstrated the capabilities of a single vessel. Ambassador Price's final words to the Galactic Council became part of human legend and were broadcast across every human world as a declaration of principles that would guide them through the coming war. Chairman, you are correct that the Empire has thousands of ships, and we have only proven the worth of one. However, you are forgetting something important about humans. We built that ship from pieces of alien wreckage, using nothing but determination and ingenuity. She paused to let her words sink in before delivering the statement that would inspire human resistance movements for generations to come. If we can build one ship that can destroy 30 Korthic vessels, then we can build 100 ships that can destroy 3,000. The only question is whether you want to be free when this war ends, or whether you prefer to remain slaves forever. The war that followed Ambassador Price's declaration changed everything about how conflicts were fought among the stars. Humanity did not simply engage the Korthic Empire in traditional battles, but instead revolutionized the very concept of galactic warfare through tactics that no alien species had ever considered. Human commanders like Admiral Ryan Clark and General Patricia Stone developed strategies that emphasized mobility and surprise over the massive fleet engagements that had dominated space combat for centuries. Instead of meeting Korthic forces in direct confrontation, they struck at supply lines and communication networks while inspiring resistance movements on occupied worlds. The effect was devastating for an empire that had grown comfortable with predictable enemies who fought according to established rules. Korthic commanders found themselves facing opponents who attacked from unexpected directions and used weapons combinations that their tactical computers could not analyze or counter effectively. However, the most significant impact of human involvement was not military, but psychological. For the first time in 3 centuries, oppressed species across the galaxy saw proof that the Korthic Empire could be defeated. Resistance movements that had been dormant for generations suddenly erupted into open rebellion as hope replaced despair. The Tillian Commonwealth proved to be valuable allies because their aquatic nature had given them unique perspectives on 3-dimensional warfare. Combined with human tactical flexibility, their naval expertise helped develop new methods for coordinating attacks across multiple star systems. Simultaneously, Commander Zara Quinn led a growing force of Altarian rebels who had abandoned their government's collaboration with the Empire. Her peacekeeping experience proved invaluable for organizing civilian populations and establishing supply networks that could support extended military operations. The surviving Zelani contributed their advanced scientific knowledge to help humanity improve their hybrid technology even further. Dr. Paul Carter worked closely with Zelani researchers to develop new applications for the neural quantum computer systems that gave human ships unprecedented tactical advantages. However, despite these successes, the war was not going well for the human alliance. The Korthak Empire controlled vast resources and had centuries of military experience that allowed them to absorb losses and continue fighting. More importantly, Emperor Zarthul had decided to end the rebellion by attacking Earth directly. Intelligence reports reached Admiral Jake Morrison, indicating that the Emperor was assembling the largest fleet in galactic history for a decisive assault on humanity's homeworld. Over 3,000 ships were gathering in the Korthak home system, including the Emperor's personal flagship and the most advanced warships in the Imperial arsenal. Jake understood that this represented both the greatest threat and the greatest opportunity that humanity would face in the war. If the Emperor's fleet succeeded in destroying Earth, then human resistance would collapse and the rebellion would end. However, if they could defeat such a massive force, then the Empire itself might fall apart. The problem was that humanity appeared to have only 200 ships available to defend Earth against 3,000 enemy vessels. Even with their technological advantages, the odds seemed impossible, and many military advisors recommended evacuating the population rather than attempting a hopeless defense. However, Jake had been keeping a secret that would soon shock both allies and enemies throughout the galaxy. The Defiance had never been intended as humanity's only advanced warship, but rather as a prototype for something much larger. The Phoenix Initiative had been working for 3 years to convert every ship in the human fleet. The massive orbital shipyards around Earth had been operating at maximum capacity since the first Korthak attack, and they had produced something that no alien species had ever attempted. Using the hybrid technology developed from the Zelani wreckage, humans had created the first mass-produced starships designed specifically for war. Every human vessel from massive dreadnoughts to small patrol craft had been upgraded with Zelani energy systems and enhanced hull materials. However, the real innovation was not in individual ship capabilities, but in how they worked together as an integrated fighting force. Dr. Ben Crawford's neural quantum computers had been networked across the entire fleet, allowing for coordination and tactical response times that were impossible with conventional command structures. Each ship could share sensor data and targeting information instantly, while adapting to changing battle conditions in real time. Colonel Nina Foster's weapons research had produced standardized armament packages that could be manufactured quickly and installed on any hull design. The hybrid projectile energy weapons that had proven so effective against Korthak ships were now mounted on vessels throughout the fleet. Most importantly, human shipyards had solved the problem of crew training by developing mixed species crews for every vessel. Humans provided tactical leadership and creative problem solving, while Zelani officers contributed technical expertise and Nautilian navigators ensured optimal positioning during combat operations. When Emperor Zarthul's armada finally arrived in the Sol system, the aliens expected to find a desperate defense force trying to protect Earth with inadequate resources. Instead, they encountered something that challenged every assumption about how galactic warfare should be conducted. The Emperor himself commanded the assault from his flagship, the Infinite Dominion, which was larger than most human space stations and carried enough firepower to destroy entire planets. His fleet included veteran ships that had conquered dozens of star systems and crews with centuries of combat Experience. Emperor Zarthul opened the battle with a broadcast that was transmitted across all frequencies and intended to break human morale before the fighting began. He demanded Earth's immediate surrender and promised that quick submission would result in merciful treatment for the civilian population. Admiral Morrison's response became the most famous military communication in human history and was recorded by ships from every species involved in the conflict. He looked directly into the transmission screen with the calm confidence of someone who held cards that his opponent could not see. Emperor Zarthul, you are correct about one thing. This is where your empire ends and freedom begins. However, you have made a serious mistake in your calculations about human capabilities. Jake paused for effect while tactical displays showed the Korthic fleet moving into attack formation, and his words carried the weight of humanity's entire future among the stars. You see 3,000 ships facing 200 defenders, and assume that numbers determine victory. What you do not understand is that every human vessel is crewed by people who chose to fight rather than accept slavery. That makes all this difference in the universe. The battle that followed became known as the Liberation of Sol, and it marked the end of Korthic dominance throughout the galaxy. The Emperor's fleet attacked in traditional formations, expecting to overwhelm human defenses through superior firepower and numerical advantage. Instead, they encountered a defensive strategy that seemed to violate every principle of space combat that had been developed over millennia. Human ships moved in coordinated patterns that confused Korthic targeting systems, while their hybrid weapons caused damage that Imperial engineers had thought impossible. The turning point came when Emperor Zarthul realized that his opponents were not fighting like any species he had ever encountered. Human tactics emphasized individual initiative and rapid adaptation, while Korthic doctrine relied on rigid command structures and predictable response patterns. Captain Lisa Warren commanded the heavy cruiser Resilience, and her actions during the battle demonstrated why human leadership was so effective. When her ship's weapon systems were damaged by enemy fire, she improvised repairs, using equipment from other sections while continuing to maneuver aggressively. However, the most devastating aspect of the battle for the Korthic was the discovery that their enemies were willing to sacrifice themselves for abstract principles. Human ships repeatedly placed themselves in extreme danger to protect damaged vessels or civilian evacuation transports. This behavior was so contrary to Imperial military doctrine that Korthic tactical computers experienced system failures trying to predict human responses. Ships that should have retreated when damaged instead fought harder, while crews that should have surrendered chose to continue fighting against impossible odds. The Emperor's flagship came under direct assault when Admiral Morrison led a concentrated attack against the center of the Korthic formation. The Defiance and 12 other human vessels charged through enemy lines while every weapon fired at maximum power. Emperor Zarthul's final transmission was broadcast as his flagship lost power and began to drift helplessly in space. His words revealed the shock and confusion of a being who had never encountered opponents willing to die for their beliefs rather than submit to superior force. How is this possible? No species has ever defeated the Empire in direct combat. Your ships are inferior, and your numbers are inadequate. Victory should be impossible. Admiral Morrison's reply was heard throughout the galaxy as the Emperor's flagship exploded in a fireball that could be seen from Earth's surface.